I think there's a level of self-assurance that comes with hexad that as an attachment child can be very jarring.
I think also the 6 at the end of the day is terrified. We are terrified that we are the cause of our own suffering.
Nancy just doesn't stop doing things. Courtney just doesn't stop thinking. Guys, just shut up. Just take a nap. You'll feel better in the morning.
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, over the 5-wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
I hate introing the pod. So welcome to the podcast. This is a Nancy-centric podcast like all of you asked for, and I will hate every minute of it. So you're welcome. We have our lovely guests, Courtney and Alexandra, and we are going to do a Bermuda-centric podcast. Super excited about that. So you can listen to this while you're falling asleep. It'll be nice and relaxing for you. Make sure you go buy John's book. It's awesome, and he will appreciate it if you buy it, and you will appreciate it if you buy it. And also David's handbook is out, and also the Dark Arts Academy is out. So if you want to be a wizard, then you should go there. That's all the plugs I'm going to do. So yeah, did you guys get the questions that Emeka sent? They aren't really exactly what I was planning on talking about, so now I'm a bit frazzled. So
I kind of figure we can just kind of wing it. It sounds like Emeka's just wanting attachment circus.
Right, which we're all on here, so he'll get attachment circus no matter what.
Yeah, I know that you wanted to have a focus on religion. I think maybe what if we started with some of his questions just to kind of intro it? Because I think naturally a conversation can go into how religion has shaped our view or how attachment happens in a sort of like religious atmosphere and how it's, all that stuff.
Yeah, and he did make a point, or someone made a point that religion is just another way that attachment shows up. He made the point that attachment shows up through religion just like it would in any relationship, but it's just another way to attach. So speaking about attachment would be speaking about religion in a sense anyway. So, yeah. So the first question that Emeka asked was, are there any new attachments to disconnect insights from the perspective of your type? For example, in your relationships, in what ways have you caught yourself creating disconnect in your relationships that ensures you're not fully seen or supported? So I think Courtney just makes sure that her sound quality is constantly terrible, and then she can feel not supported. And
that's exactly right. Okay. Yeah. So who wants to lead this?
Well, I'll start. The first time that we spoke about this specific question, one of the things that I think all three of us agreed upon is that by making a commitment to never fully reveal ourselves in some way, we ensure that we're not fully seen or supported. And that's part of the vicious, virtuous cycle of attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is I can't dare to reveal myself because I may risk not feeling attached to you. Yet the fact that I never trust that I can fully see or reveal myself to you means that I don't actually trust that we're fully attached.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then you can constantly go back and keep reattaching in a way that satisfies in quotes, that attachment bullshit.
Yeah, it just keeps your sort of ego fixation going, or the ego project going in a way. So how does that show up for you guys? It is kind of a hard topic to
dive right into.
Approach. Yeah. Or to even see. It's so subtle. Okay, so one way that I do it that I'm sure John loves and holds close to his heart, due to comfort of clarity, is one of the things I found myself doing is I will just how do I say? I was going to say rapid fire questions, but it's not exactly rapid. But I will ask him for his location over and over and over. Like, okay, if I'm being honest, I can't even think of an example, but let's say that I don't like how I look today. So instead of just saying, I don't like how I look today, I will try to I'll try to get him to say that he doesn't like how I look so that I can use that as a direction that I need to fix myself. I need to get him to admit that, I wish you would just change your shirt or something like that. And then I'll go change my shirt. Easy.
Yes. And then I can confirm that how I look is now correct because you corrected
it. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's not enough for me to not like how I look, because if it's almost like if I don't like how I look, then who cares? I need someone else to not like how I look so that I can do something about it, because what better motivation?
Well, and also for me, it's I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it in my head, right? Mm-hmm. I can feel like something's off, but there's no fixing it until someone tells me what's off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I guess what I hear both of you saying too is that there's an external voice that needs to deter, even if you feel in yourself a small piece that's oh, something's off, it still needs to be validated by an external voice.
Mm-hmm.
And almost the lack of habit of sort of trusting that that's something's off in what I'm wearing. What should I change about it? It's we lack practice in sort of really drilling down in that. And so it's then even that initial, something's off here, help me specify by getting outside feedback. Help me narrow it down, this vague sort of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's kind of hammered into my brain with I base a lot of my current decisions off of what's happened in the past. Mm-hmm. So it's before, if I've gone off of my own, oh, I want to fix this and I think it's this, so therefore I'm going to do that. Later on, I find out that decision was wrong. And I'm see, this is what happens. This is what happens when I listen to myself. And then in the future, I go, that's not a good decision because last time that was a mistake.
Yep.
That's really interesting
for me.
No, because I was going to say some of that checking with the other person is right. The way that I've set it up is I can listen to my voice and risk that you won't support me, or you won't, I alienate you, or some version, I lose attachment to you if I dare to sort of stand for what I want. We can use clothes as a stupid example, but it applies elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And it's almost by me sort of checking in. It's I'm trying to get you to collude and be part of it, take you along with me so that I don't have to
almost create a shared experience, or
yeah, exactly. You're with me, right? You agree this is shit. What should I do differently? Can I get you sort of on my team in this project of what I'm trying to fix here, so that then I don't have to choose. I don't even have to, I'm not risking the choice between being connected to you and sort of doing my own thing.
Does it give you sometimes it gives me someone else to blame. Mm-hmm. Does it ever do that for you?
It does for me. It completely shifts the blame. If somebody leads me astray, then I can say, my slate is still clean.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm so similar, this is kind of mirroring what you were saying, to use just the silly example of clothes. The reason I need guidance on what I'm going to do next is because what if I choose something I feel good in, but I look objectively stupid in?
Right. And then it's a double whammy. I look stupid, but I also feel stupid because it was my choice.
Right. Yeah. And then to go even more meta with it is I now feel dumb. I now feel even dumber because people have seen that I feel good in this dumb choice.
Exactly. Yeah. I have dated people in the past where I didn't really listen to other people's opinions about them. And then like I look back and I'm like, that was a big mistake. And then they met all of my friends circle, and as a 3, right, that's like, didn't like that, how you made me look, how you made my image look in those moments. And I didn't listen to the people around me, or they didn't tell me, which I hate even more. They were like, oh, I knew the whole time. And I'm like, so you're just thinking this about me in the back of your head and you're not bothering to voice it. And that, of course, adds to a layer of paranoia to like, see, this is what's really going on in people's heads all the time. They're just constantly thinking about you. And it's like, no one's thinking about you ever. No one gives a shit.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting to me, because I do think there is a slight difference where for me, it does feel like it's very support based. Like, not so much like, do I care what you think, or like, are you thinking something, but more like, what will it cost me if we dare to think differently?
Can you go into that more? Because I'll just preface it by saying, like, sometimes I do see a similarity between 3 and 9. And I feel like 6 is a little bit on the outskirts of that, because it feels like 6 will do, how do I say this? It feels like 9 and 3 are a bit more elusive, and that we're almost not going to show our location unless we know what the right answer is. And 6 will show you both of their options, but not commit to something, but want you to be along the ride for like the yes and the no, so that we can get to the yes together. Am I understanding that correctly? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because like personally, I'll be really like, you're not going to get anything from me until I get some hint of like, this is the direction to take. And then I will just act like that's been my choice the whole time.
No, that's not really how that's not quite how I think about it for myself. It's more like I'm trying things on with you, floating things. And some of that ping pong quality is, it's like me kind of like asking you to be part of my mind as I'm floating through, as I'm bouncing back and forth between options. It's like I need a stabilizing force to help me as I'm ping ponging.
Yeah. Nancy, how do you resonate with that? Because there's something to note that all 3 of us have 6 and all 3 of us have 3.
Yeah. I think I'm somewhere in between. Sometimes I want someone to like ping pong off of, and sometimes I am not going to show you anything until you tell me what the right answer is, and I'll be that. Both resonate for me. It's almost like it depends on the person in front of me and what they enjoy more.
That's very 3.
It's very 3.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's very funny. I experienced the ping pong myself, but I'm not gonna show that. That's going to be hidden. So that is my relationship to 6, is that I do have that ping pong, but it's not forward. And then what I relate to with 3 is that I am looking for that sort of correct answer, but I'm absolutely not assertive about it at all. I'm not like, how do I say this? Like, my understanding of 3 is that 3 will take action towards what you think is, did I just mess that up? Yeah, 3 will take action. 3 will like feel into you. Oh, this is what you want. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to make it seem like it was my choice the whole time. And that you're surprised. You're like pleasantly surprised by like, wow, she's everything I want her to be.
Right. I intuited this.
Yes.
But you think it's just part of me.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas me as a 9, I am basically waiting for you to tell me somehow. And that you're going to know that you're kind of going to know that you're telling me. And that I'm going along with your direction. Does that make any sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. But that's what I appreciate about 9s. And I could never, ever be with a 3 personally, because both of us would constantly be intuiting into each other's bullshit. And it would just be like this bullshit cycle all the way down to like where we're just no one. But 9s, I feel like, are a bit easier to like know the game that they're playing.
Like I'm waiting for the assertive action, and then I will just flow along with that. I'm waiting for like if John says he wants, Indian food today and even hints at it a little bit, I'm like, let's do that. Let's go there. Yeah, whatever.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Sure.
Nines make good travel partners for that exact reason.
I mean, I do think I'm just sort of thinking about how it's different for 6. I mean, this is a stupid example, but I like a lot of caffeine in the morning. And if Graham and I are like at my husband, if we're out like at a breakfast place I've never been before, and I'm like, how many shots are in your coffee? How many shots are in your cappuccino? And he's absolutely like, so, and then the waiter responds and then blah, 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 and I finally get what I want. And I actually know from the very beginning that I want 4 shots in my cappuccino. And Graham knows that I want 4 shots because that's how I always order it. And he's like, why don't you just start with that? I don't understand why we go through this process of you asking how many standard shots are in it. Can they make another shot? When really you just want 4 shots, just say it.
Wow. So what is doing that? Okay. So it sounds like like you enjoy the process of getting there.
Somehow I think it's too forward.
Okay.
I'm kind of like politely inquiring, like, how does it normally work around here? And would it be too much for me to ask if you could slightly change it? Like, because if this is how, if the standard is you do 4 shots, I don't have to ask for anything different.
Oh yeah.
So remind me what your stacking is, Courtney.
631.
Oh, your instinct stacking.
Oh, social, self-pres, sexual, blind.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so I'm wondering if that's a bit of social. Yeah, all of us are sexual blind. I'm wondering if that's a bit of it is a bit of social coming in rather than the 6 itself, but it kind of muddles together because 6 and social overlap a lot.
Well, and I do think that there is something just say what you want. Like, what is, like, you already know what you want.
Yeah. And to relate even to that coffee example, I don't even think to question changes. I will just have the coffee however it comes. Like, I don't even think to ask what's in it, how much is in it, is that what I want? I just will accept it. Okay, this only has 2 shots and I wanted 4. I don't know, I'll find a way to get another 2 somewhere down the road. But this comes this way, so I'm going to accept it this way.
Well, I think that's super interesting when you think about like the withdrawn, the assertive, and the kind of compliance, or what I call merit-based strategy for like meeting your needs of the 3 different types, where the 9 is sort of basically like attachment in a withdrawn style is sort of like, this is good enough. Like, I'll just settle for this. And the assertive version of attachment is like, this is what I want. Like, I'm going to make it okay with, whatever you've got going on over there, I could fix it. I will assert reality. And the merit-based is like, I've got to earn this. So it's almost like I'm asking politely, I'm doing it the right way, I'm not being a jerk about it. And maybe you'll give me my 4 shots.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I just assume I will not get the 4 shots unless it's like presented in front of me like that. Like, if it comes 4 shots, I'm like pleasantly surprised. But if it's just 2 shots, I'm like, well, yeah, that's how it goes. That's the standard. What are you going to do? What would you do,
Nancy? Like, wink at them or flirt with them or something?
Yeah, I would charm them into it. Yeah.
Right.
I'd be like, oh my God, like, I really need to wake up. Like, I cannot wake up in the mornings. You know what I mean? Like, just, oh, look at the weather. It's so rainy. Like, I need an extra shot of it. And they'd be like, oh, haha, you're so funny. Like, do that charming bullshit social. Yeah.
It's funny. Okay, let's see. What do you guys think about, I liked this question. Hang on, I just looked at it and then didn't process it in my brain. Yeah, what is your impression of the other attachment types in contrast to yours? So like, Nancy, I've heard at least privately, I've heard how 9 stresses you out. I've heard how like the dissociation, the just like accepting whatever, this sort of like latent body hit. I've heard it just completely stress you out. And Nancy,
just a bit
with a 9, and you, who doesn't have experience with 9s? What do you guys think?
Now I have to think about it.
Yeah, like what stresses you out or pisses you off, or do you think it's weird, or that could be kind of fun, just kind of lightly roast each other.
That's true. I think the number one thing that stresses me out about like the other attachment types is the seeming willingness to like sacrifice yourself for the specifically 9s, right? This isn't so much 6s. 6s in my experience don't do this. But it's like this like completely being unaware of what your needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And like I will see that a 9 needs something, but I have I don't want to force it on them. If that makes sense.
Yes,
right? Because that can also be uncomfortable. Like I get it. If you're like having anxiety, but you like need it, like I get it. I get that it's anxiety inducing if someone like asks for you sometimes, but it's like, I need you to take care of your physical needs and mental needs and like all these needs so that you can also like be alive in 10 years,
Yeah. Oh my God. You said almost verbatim what John tells me. He doesn't say it so much anymore. I think he believes in my competency now. But there was a while that John was like, I need you to take care of yourself. I need you to drink water. I need you to get enough sleep. I need you to take care of yourself to last a long time. And my reaction from the jump was like, what is wrong with, I can take care of myself just fine. Just because I'm not like leaping out of bed in the morning and drinking a gallon of water doesn't mean I don't know how to like listen. He has some valid points, but
we usually do. We do have valid points.
I do think there's something really interesting here just because of the lines between the 3 attachment types and growth and stress and integration and all of that, which is, we are going to make up stories about these other types that keep us from basically integrating their perspective that would sort of undo parts of our own identity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like for me, for example, and this is because I think I've spoken about this, like I've done persona work where I've had to like claim my inner 9, and her name is Willow, by the way. And initially what I had to do was sort of come up with like the worst possible version of a 9. Like what am I afraid of would happen to me if I ever took in that 9 energy?
That's interesting. So what is it? What's the worst?
Well, so the worst thing is like, you're just fucking checked out. You're missing everything. Right. Like it's like, like on Back to the Future where the guy's like, hello, McFly, like knocking on the guy's head. Like that is like my, caricature of what happens with 9 energy is just that you've like literally fallen and from a 6 perspective, that just feels so scary. That fuzziness and the sort of checking out, like what you may miss something really important. And I would never let that happen.
Yeah. For me, it's not so much missing something important as it is missing like happiness. Like you aren't going after your own happiness. As in like 9s, I feel often put their happiness aside, to just exist. And it's like discomfort, it takes some discomfort to get to reach that point of peak living and, in a very 3 term. And, but it's worth it in my mind. And so, I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to make sure that my 9, gets that experience. So it's like, because I feel like he's not going to make it on his own for some reason, even though he's a completely competent adult.
Well, I do think that like I make up a story a little bit, and I hear Nancy, you doing the same thing. That like if you're not feeling pain, what is motivating you? Like what motivates change if you're not in touch with what's bothering you?
Yeah. Yep. You hit the nail on the head there. You have to know what's going on inside to want to do anything about it. Just what you just said, but yeah.
So those are the things that are scary about the 9 for the 3 and the 6.
What's scary about the 3 for the 6 and the 9?
Hello, the narcissism.
I love the answer right as I'm drinking water. Yeah, thank you. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have narcissism. We are so perfect that we don't have narcissism.
3 is just so difficult for me to grasp as a like practice, like a physical practice almost. And I know it's not a body type or whatever, but like it's very difficult for me to locate what it would be like or what it would feel like. And even times where I have like been at 3 or feel, more comfortable being in charge of my own image, it almost doesn't, it just feels very foreign. So I think what feels scary to me about 3 is this inability to hide. It sounds so 9, but like it's this inability to hide. Like, how am I gonna, if people are watching me all the time, isn't that gonna be exhausting that I have to be on all the time? And
yes.
Yes. And it's also like, if I'm being witnessed all the time, it creates this pressure that there's no room for error. Whereas like, if no one can see me, nobody can see how I'm like doing well or doing poorly. Most importantly, no one can see how I'm doing poorly. But if everyone can see me and they see me fail, it's like, I don't know how do you come back from, at least me going to 3, it feels like I can't risk not being able to come back from something ever. So it feels like literally putting myself out on a ledge and like walking across a tightrope. And if I fall, everyone sees it. That's what it feels like for me. It's not so much the like the fear of like looking full of myself. It's the fear of making a fool of myself.
So it feels unsafe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I will say being a 3, it feels very unsafe too. So
it sounds
just not a very 9 perspective. That's very accurate of what it's like living as a 3.
I think from the 6 perspective, part of the 6, the underlying assumption is that the world is coming at us, right? And we're sort of at the mercy of the world, which is why we need to be so focused and gathering resources, gathering support, being prepared, anticipating worst case scenarios, collecting data, analyzing the grid, etc. They're really, the underlying assumption is like, this is a really big, scary world and I can't face it on my own. I cannot stand up to the world on my own. And I think for 6s, the audacity of the 3 to believe that they're capable is actually what we need, but is actually very scary for us.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, so from a 3 perspective, we have all of that, but we assume that we can handle it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
Which often is wrong, but it could, a mix of that would be nice.
Well, I think it's because, that's why the judgment of narcissism and like, what do you mean you just are so sure it's going to like work out? Like, what do you mean you like just like think you got this in the bag? Like, how dare you? All of those judgments, all of those judgments are just a way of me not taking my medicine from the 3.
Right.
Right. And allow me to continue to not actually integrate that high side. So it's a total projection on my part. And maybe there's some truth in it also.
Sure, it's a yes and kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the 9 for a second, because there's what would be my medicine, because to me it just seems like a terrible life plan. But I know that's not accurate.
Oh my God.
I'm just sitting here and I'm like, well, there's something I could take from this. But my brain is just like, no, it's just a bad idea.
The medicine of the 9 for you is that you actually have less agency than you think. And there's like a flow of life force and whatever's happening that needs to happen that is actually not yours. It's bigger than yours. So you don't need to have an agenda in order for you to move through the world.
Yep. Hate that. Good.
That's so interesting to hear you say that, because I'm like, what do you mean? 9 is only medicine for everybody. Everybody needs a nap. Everyone needs a break. Everyone needs to slow down. Everyone's exhausted and it's making me tired. Everyone please chill out.
Everybody needs a bed, a sofa that is a bed in their living room that they can sleep on.
Yeah, it's it feels like Nancy just doesn't stop doing things. Courtney just doesn't stop thinking. Guys, just shut up. Just take a nap. You'll feel better in the morning.
I don't disagree.
We're medicine for you also.
Yes.
Yeah. So then the 6.
So fun. So much fun.
Let's see. 6 is a little difficult because I was going to say that I don't have much fear around 6, but I have a really hard time being at 6. So maybe I do have some fear around it. I guess it feels like, actually, I'm not sure yet.
6, the place of being in 6 offers me a chance to be more curious than like 3 or 9 usually does. So that's what it offers me typically. So I pull very positively from my 6 space usually. It does give me some anxieties, sometimes get too much going, but usually it offers me a space to like really enjoy exploring new things with or without people.
That's really cool. I think for me, it feels a bit like a siphon of my energy. Like it feels a bit like I'm just going to be, I don't know, just like spinning and not necessarily going anywhere. Like with 3, there is a use of energy, but I'm more reticent to use my energy in that direction because I'm afraid of, it's basically like fear of being seen poorly. Whereas 6, it almost feels like my energy will be used unproductively, which is interesting to hear myself say. I'm not sure, and like, of course, the positive relationship that I have to 6 is that it does keep me sharp and that it keeps me alert. And it reminds me that I need to like jolt myself awake in order to be able to move forward and like look at all the things that are, that need to be addressed. But I think like my instinctual response to 6 in my body is that it feels like my energy is just going to zap, like it's just going to be wrung out of me and then I'll be left useless.
I do feel like as a 6, I have envy or I, like chip on my shoulder feeling like the 3s and the 9s make their way sort of more smoothly through the world than we do. That I kind of can't help myself, but that sharpness, that focusing on the what if, that sort of the negativity, the reactivity, all the things that we're doing, I know that 3s and 9s suffer, but I feel like the suffering of the 3 and the 9 is more internal, whereas the suffering for the 6 is pretty evident.
Yeah, that feels right. Yeah. I will say, just to piggyback off of that, I do think that the confidence of a 6 is earned, whereas the confidence of a 9 and a 3 is almost taken for granted. I think maybe like the 3s is taken for granted and the 9, I mean, maybe the 9s is taken for granted. But there is like when 6 gains certainty or clarity, it feels very grounded and it feels very like I did the work and now I know that I'm sure. I'm not just leaving it up to like the universe, and I'm not just leaving it up to like I can do anything. I put in the time and the hours to know that what I'm doing is the right thing to do. So there is like a showing the work of 3 or of that comes from being in a 6 space, that when I do move forward again into 9 and then eventually into 3, it does feel like I'm on a correct path because I've earned it.
Yeah, it's also the suffering of 6 is a bit more visual, like from the outside, like it is more tangible, but I feel like that earns them the trust of others, right? Because if a 6 does come to you with like a confidence, you have seen them walk through problems like this a million times, and you're like, okay, you got here because you were prepared, right? Nobody ever comes to me for advice. Like people don't come to me for like actual tangible advice, right? They come to me for a pep talk, but I go to like 6s for advice.
Yeah, that's
so
a really great point. That is a really great point because my dad is a 6 and I know that I can trust his advice with anything because he's like been sort of like on the battlefield already about it and knows the correct solution.
Yep. I had to figure out health insurance recently. And I was like, I don't know if this is a good insurance company to go with. And I called my dad and he was like, actually, I know exactly. There's a chart on a website that rates all of them based on this, and this. So here, let's go read it together. And I'm like, exactly. I would have just been like, oh, it has a pretty logo.
Right. You're right. And I just would have like picked one and been like, oh, hope this works.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have known that about myself.
Yeah, that was a really great thing to bring up. I remember seeing on one of the group's posts, there was like some girl was typed as a 6 and she thought she was something else, and her reasons or somebody's reason, just some other commenter said the reason she is not a 6 is because she is confident and she is self-assured and she like knows what she's doing or whatever. Yeah. And it did cause this like weird defensive reaction in me. And it was basically, Nancy, exactly what you spelled out. Like there are self-assured and confident 6s. And in fact, they have the most deserved and earned confidence and self-assurance because they've like done the work to fucking get it. So when you do go to a 6 for advice, they're going to give you absolute, solid, stable, dependable information.
Right. And they're going to tell you if they can't.
Yeah, because it's not just based in like blind confidence or faith. It's because they've done it. They've tried and tested it. And that is a lot of what reactivity is, right? It's like testing what it is, especially with 6.
I do think that we are also like pretty committed to life not being easy.
Yeah.
And so therefore the path of growth has to be hard earned.
Yeah.
And so we're going to tell you about how hard we worked for it. We don't want you to think we got here effortlessly. that
you keep it real.
That would be too easy. And I do think that is another, right? That's part of like with the 3 and the 9. I think it is sort of in some way related to attachment. Like, you know, there is like, can you see how hard I'm working here? You know, like that part of the 6 in the attachment style that maybe is not there in the 3 and the 9.
Well, and I feel like 6s probably create a lot of work for themselves, right? There isn't always the need to work as hard as they're working, but they create it.
Wait, say that part again. I missed that.
So there isn't always a need for 6s to work as hard as they do, but they make sure that they work as hard as they do so that they can earn it, maybe?
Well, and if you have to like solicit 10 people's opinions and make sure they're coming along for the ride with you before you make a decision, and you have to anticipate every contingency that may go wrong before you like on the way someplace. I mean, your belief that life is not easy is you have manifested that.
Right.
Right. Is there also a possibility that the reason the 6s make things harder for themselves is so that people can see that it is hard? Like it's like earning very thorough support. Is it something like that? Like rather than taking the easy route, like maybe a 3 or a 9 would, like the 3 is like the skipping ahead and the path of least resistance for 9. 6 is going to go in the trenches to show everyone I've done this work thoroughly. And so now I have to get now you will have my support because you see the whole process.
I think also the 6 at the end of the day is terrified. We are terrified that we are the cause of our own suffering. And that the thing we fear the most, whatever bad thing is going to befall us, is actually something that we wrought as opposed to the world itself. And so some of that working very, very hard, I think, is because the 6 really wants to convince themselves and really wants to convince other people that if something bad happens, it was not because of me.
Well, that so hurts my heart.
Yeah, I will go way overboard so that accusation could never be lobbed.
Yeah, wow. That's hard for me to even understand.
it's very important to the 6 that suffering be external.
Mm-hmm.
So I can always be acting defensively in response to, as opposed to, but what if it's me? What if it's the fact? What if it's me who's done something wrong? What if I've made the bad decision?
That's a lot of pressure, dude.
Yeah, that's why part of what's creating the inner committee and like soliciting all those points of view as so that I can blame it on someone else if it doesn't go right.
Yeah.
And I'll have to take responsibility for my life.
So how does being a parent work then as a 6? I feel like that's a lot of decision making by yourself.
I think it's a longer topic because I've done a lot of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware that I'm the only parent on this call, and although you guys obviously have parents and have full perspective on it from a kid's perspective, I generally feel like I was thinking about Emeka talking about sort of the lens of attachment kind of coloring how we understand parenting. And I do think that is true. I generally feel like over the last 30 years or 25 years, there's been this real concern about attachment between parent and child. And how do I ensure that my child is securely attached? And to me, that's a relatively new phenomenon that a parent would even use that language to talk about their relationship with their kid, and that would even be a worry that would come up for them. And to me, it sort of implies sort of almost that these are attachment people because attachment feels fragile. And therefore, that's one of the implicit assumptions of that kind of parenting philosophy. And I think for the 6, for me as a parent, it's really sort of forced me to understand that, I'm soliciting advice, I'm getting input, all of those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I often confuse myself more rather than just sort of kind of going internally and what's my intuition here? Can I trust that I'm seeing reality clearly? If I actually spend 5 minutes paying attention to my kid, paying attention to what's going on, paying attention to what's going on in my body as I think about this thing versus reading a bunch of books about what I should do. Can I trust that that might actually be the better path to the best decision? And that's been a whole exploration for me that I've had to do and I continue to do as a parent.
Yeah, well,
Courtney over here doing the real work.
Well, I think that having kids forces all of that.
Yeah.
What types were each of your parents? Since we're all attachment types, who were we parented by? I say both of my parents are attachment types, which was a very strange. Now knowing this language and having this information. Now looking back on, my sister's also a 9, so it was 2 attachment children with 2 attachment parents. So there's just this vicious cycle of attachment that still exists. Anyway, what about you guys?
Nancy?
Well, my dad's a 6 and my mom's an 8.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, as a child, the 8 mother was great fun.
Yeah.
But as a teen to a young adult to, I guess now fully fledged adult or whatever you want to call 26, I am much closer to my dad now, just because he seems much more human to me than my very detached 8 mom.
Okay, so you experienced your mom as detached. Interesting. Okay, yeah, we'll get into that. Courtney, what about you?
My mom's a 2, and my dad, I actually don't, I go back and forth between 3 and 5.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have potential double hexad parents, hexad and attachment, and attachment.
Okay. Fun.
So I guess one question I have is, did you notice a difference? It's obviously hard, 8 versus 6 and male versus female, mom versus dad, all that kind of stuff. But hexad versus attachment, is there something you could say about that? Looking back on your experience where you would generalize to that was the driving difference in terms of how they parented you?
I think there's a level of self-assurance that comes with hexad that as an attachment child can be very jarring. So there's a sense of, I did my part. Now you do yours, which has its place in parenting for sure. But I think, just like any other aspect of our types can be overdone. And I think it was overdone in my experience with my mom. And then with my dad, there was a overdoing I'm so unsure of how to do this right that I don't want to do it at all at times.
Interesting.
And now he's coming around to, well, I already fucked up. So, which is much easier to handle than I did everything I could deal with the repercussions, right? As an attachment, it's much easier to handle well, I done fucked up and I'm back now than it is with the kind of cool hands-off feel, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Do you think he was sort of following your mom's lead, or do you think it was like a gender thing that was, this is how dads are not supposed to be that hands-on or something?
I think there were lots of aspects. Part of it was probably just him being unsure how to dad. He had two sons and then a daughter, and it's like, how do I connect with you? And then there was also that he's self-pres 6-wing 5. And I think he was so unhappy with his job and he was so afraid of not providing that I think that was all he could muster, was to just do that. Which, like, I get. I can barely muster cleaning the dishes sometimes, so I get it. Doesn't make it okay. It just is, it's very relatable to me.
I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting, from the perspective of being a parent with an attachment type, is like, what do I do when attachments are in conflict, and who am I attaching to? And so am I attaching to my kids? Is that the attachment I'm trying to preserve with my parenting? Or am I actually trying to preserve attachment to my own parents, or, some sort of social structure, my church, the broader family, my community? Because I think that ends up sort of coloring the parenting. I think the kid who's the recipient of that can feel that. So I guess it sort of depends on which way it's going. I can imagine that, like, as there have been at times when I've given way too much authority to my children, right, and have taken their opinion far too seriously, in that sort of desire to maintain attachment, or this sort of every opinion matters that's in the system. You're in this system, so I'm going to hear your opinion, and so I'm cognizant that that's something that I've done, and I'm also sort of cognizant that it's this kind of parenting philosophy that I'm attached to. And so therefore I'm going to parent this way. And I'm actually not going to see you as a child. Maybe that's the right strategy for you, but maybe it's not. And so I can feel both of those within myself, I guess.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, and I am so disconnected to what it must be like to have a kid and be, it's hard for me even to sit here and listen to that and imagine, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder, okay, so as I said, I'm a 9, my sister is a 9, and then my mother is a 9. So there's 3 9s in my family. And my dad is a 6. And just for background, they were both raised Catholic, Puerto Rican Catholic, very, very, very strict about it, very just to the book. So they already had a very strong external attachment in the way that they were conducting themselves, in the way that they were raising us too. And from my, hindsight is 2020, or kind of, I guess it's just clearing up over time. But now in hindsight, I'm seeing that they were attached to my sister and I needing to get on board with their attachment. Does that make any sense? Like they needed us to follow the rules that they were setting in place because we were going to be extensions of them doing things correctly or incorrectly.
So so they didn't just need you to follow the rules, they needed you to then enforce the rules later on as well. Because you were also on board.
Like you're basically a tool or an agent through which they're attaching to something else.
Yes.
Your behavior as a child.
Yes. My sister and I became measurements of how well they were upholding their attachment to an external structure. And of course, like, we're both 9, so we just did it. But it became this thing. And like, for more context, my parents split up when I was, can't remember now, when I was like 8 or 9 or something like that, which caused them to, it was just like a forced individualization. And I was now, again, in hindsight, I could see their attachment get even stronger. Like with my mom, it became this, now she needs us to tell her that she's doing well as a mom. You know, now her measure of like whether or not she's doing well is going to be based on our response to her. Does that make any sense? This is like it's like,
well, it's sort of what I was describing earlier with my own relationship with my kids, right? Is the kid the vehicle through which I attach to some structure, or am I actually like using parenting to attach to my child?
Right. Yes.
And who's running that?
For a long time with both of my parents, it was just this like sort of like confusing whirlpool of like where is the, in a way, you know, in a weird way. Like I think that, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. In the podcast, we have talked about how attachment creates relationships and how attachment, you know, does all of that. In a strange way, with my family and us all being attachment, we would end up in this whirlpool of like not knowing where the real relationship was because we were all so responsive to each other that there wasn't like a localized, somebody knows what they're doing and everybody can just anchor themselves off of that. Does that make any sense? Like we were all just kind of floating around trying to figure it out, but using each other as reflections on how well we were doing. You know, like I can say that I was looking at my parents to give me the green light or to give me the red light on the things that I was doing. But now in hindsight, they were doing the same with me. If I was like acting up in school, they would get upset with me, not because I was like throwing my life away or something like that. Not that it was ever that bad, but they would come to me because me acting up meant that they were doing poorly. You know what I mean? Like it didn't come from a self-assured place of like Alexandra's wrong. It was Alexandra's proof that I'm doing wrong. Are you guys following?
Yeah,
I'm totally following.
Yeah, that I remember feeling. I didn't get in trouble very often, but I remember feeling that emotion come off of my dad, but not off of my mom, and therefore I was much more responsive to my dad because I didn't want him to feel shame. Whereas anger for my mother was very acceptable.
That's interesting. And that dynamic was like very present, especially when I was younger, like in middle school and high school, that thing of like, especially when my parents separated, it became my sister and I's job to make sure that they felt okay. You know, like it was just like, let's make sure my dad feels like a good dad. Let's make sure my mom feels like a good mom. That was how we could keep our attachment to them. And it's interesting too, like my family's pretty conventional. I'm not going to say like traditional or conservative, just like conventional. They're just, you know, doing things the way every like person should do them. Go to college, get a nice job, marry a nice person, and then, you know, retire and die. I am not necessarily doing that as much as I was trying to, because that's what I thought I had to do. Now I'm kind of going off in my own direction. And, you know, when I first moved to New York, my parents and my sister, especially my sister, were all very like, what the fuck is she doing? She's gone crazy. My sister especially. And we could go into the dynamics of that, but my sister especially was like, what is she doing? But now some time has passed, and I went to see my parents not too long ago in, I don't know, mid-February or something like that. And it feels like we have a real relationship now. Like, it feels like because I'm not responding to that, and I always will, like, I'm not just like healed or whatever. Because magically. I'm not, right, yeah, I did it. Because I'm not responding to them in a weird way, they're not responding to me anymore. And so we can break out of this like weird attachment family dynamic and just talk to each other now.
I do think it's interesting. Like, it's almost like there's no, unless like with all the 9s, the 6s, like there's no energy, right, to disrupt the attachment structure. And then it just kind of becomes stultifying. And really limiting. And it really takes someone willing to sort of disrupt it. Like, and you can feel it disrupting the whole chain, the whole system is basically what you're saying. Like yes. one person's choice to, I'm not playing this game anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly how it felt. And I felt all 3 of my family members have a response to that. My mom got on board pretty quickly, but she did originally have a like, oh my God, did I just like fail my daughter as a parent? Is she going off and going to do this irresponsible shit? My dad had that same reaction. And my sister's response was to get mad at me for disrupting the sort of status attachment quo that we were all in. She's like, you're going to upset everyone. What are you doing? Like, it was anger towards me because of it.
Yeah.
But now we're all have relationships. So good for me.
So
I guess.
Suck it.
Yeah. Good for everyone.
That's really interesting because you bringing that up made me think of my family dynamic and how my brothers are a 3 and a 6. And then my dad's a 6 and my mom's an 8. And my brothers are the ones that kind of get pissed off at me for like kind of calling people out on their bullshit. Because like my 3 brother is a cop.
And, the way you said that.
You know, I give him, I don't agree with a lot of his choices. And I make it pretty well known. And my 6th brother, of course, you know, hates that. And hates that I'm so vocal on social media and really like it really grinds his gears. And he, you know, thinks that it shows our family in a bad light. And like, you know, he says all that kind of stuff. But I'd say my cop brother and I have actually all of us have a much different dynamic than we used to that is much more truthful. However, including my dad. However, my mom has almost lost the ability to have a relationship with me because I feel like this, what she expected from me as an attachment type for so long is gone. And I no longer am wanting to attach or, you know, I still do from time to time, obviously, but I am no longer like, you know, reaching out constantly to attach. And so she doesn't know how to reach back out anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, or maybe even how to reckon with you as like an individualized person and not just like a subordinate. I don't know if that's inappropriate to say, but you know.
No, I think that's completely appropriate.
Well, and I think also from an 8 mom's perspective, you know, that role is about meeting material need.
True.
And not necessarily about provide, you know, and then when you transition to being an adult child with an adult parent, what is that relationship about now? It really is about these sort of fuzzier things that for an 8 are not normally part of the relationship. So what's the offering she can make to you? You know, is like her perspective. Like, there isn't anything anymore.
Yeah.
Under her sort of pattern of identity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So now the relationship would just be based in, you know, just in desire and in love and just wanting a relationship, you know.
Heaven forbid.
Hard for it. for a not an attachment type,
a hexad,
a rejection type. Yeah, there we go.
Oh yeah. I think it's just interesting how shaking up the attachment guys can strengthen attachments or attachment type relationships, but can actually really not weaken but dampen an attachment to a hexad. Like, it's been such a flip-flop in my experience.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just think that's an interesting, it's like I was listening to Alexandra's description, and it was sort of like, oh yeah, I can see why you need attachment children with attachment parents so they can keep their attachment going. It's like the attachment child helps. But then I was listening to you, Nancy, and I was like, oh, I can see why, like, if you're a hexad parent, having an attachment child allows you to kind of keep your game going. So I'm sort of wondering if it's hexad children that, or as attachment children grow and change, that kind of force. I mean, if the idea is that like there's the material needs of and like the actual parenting, caregiving relationship between parent and child, but if you look at it as an opportunity for growth, and that's what the relationship is really about, both for the parent and for the child, what's the spark that's creating that growth? That's interesting.
For me, what it feels like in all of my individual dynamics with like each member of my family, and also as a collective, it really feels like there is a sort of spell breaking in a good way, like a sort of like chain breaking in a good way, because now we can reckon with each other as like individual people, and now it's not based in this like obedience and following and mirroring and all of the other stuff. Like, not that that's not still necessary at times, but it does feel like I can be curious about my dad as a person, and he can just display himself to me as a person, rather than like, oh, I need to make sure Alexandra's doing this and this and this, because if I'm not making sure, then I'm a bad dad. So I need to make sure I'm guiding her in a way that makes me feel like I'm doing a good job, that kind of dynamic. Because ultimately, I think with attachment parents, it's still always going to be like, am I doing a good job or not? The am I doing a good job is just the attachment curse in general.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Definitely.
And so just kind of breaking away from that, now we can kind of turn that light off and just deal with each other as people. Like, I'm not dictating his
worth.
Yeah, I'm not dictating his worth. I'm not dictating my mom's. My sister she's still kind of in that dynamic, but I think that me breaking it off with her in that way, that attachment thing, because this is another tangent, but another thing is my sister and I were very attached to each other, not in this enneagrammatic, actually, yeah, in that way too. We were very attached to each other because we had to be a team to make sure our parents were good.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents getting divorced like actually shifted the attachment to the two of you, right?
Yes. And so me shifting off is not only, it's more than just me kind of doing my own thing and like letting my parents reckon with themselves, but it's leaving my sister to do extra work now.
All the work.
Mm-hmm. And so she's had to grapple with herself, like, oh, Alexandra can just not do that. And I still fucking do it, and she still does it. We all still fucking do it. But even introducing that reality has like changed things for her too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the number one thing that pissed off my oldest brother, who's a 6. He got really mad at me for disconnecting because he was like, it's your job too. And I was like, it's not my job.
Yeah. I mean, my sister's 9, so she was never going to say it's your job. But I mean, as happens with 9, you still feel their fucking words, even if they're not saying them. So she was definitely saying that to me. Like, you're not doing your job. Like, attachment is so thick family. Yeah. And so that's what I was doing. I was like betraying the family, basically.
Yep.
And so now everyone has to, all in our own individual dynamics, but now everybody has to trust that we just love each other, that we just want to be in each other's lives. And that is extremely difficult, I think, across the board for attachment to trust. Like, oh, what are you just love me for me? That's
especially if you don't know who they are at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that even stems to a whole nother thing. Like, John and I have talked about this a lot, and I've talked about this with other like attachment friends in similar dynamics. But a lot of my insecurity around being loved so directly is I have spent so much time not being able to like see what is worth loving because I was so focused on, how do I say this? Because I was so focused on matching standards set by another person. Okay, so a more literal way to say that is like, if John wants my hair to be pink, then my hair is going to be pink. And then if he doesn't do any of this to me, by the way, for anyone listening.
Yeah, for our listeners' benefit.
Yeah.
He's not a monster.
Yeah. But the way I've sort of patterned my whole life is like, I will see, oh, this person wants my hair to be pink. I need to be I don't know, I need to have this kind of job. I need to speak in this manner of speaking. And I've been following everyone else's direction for so long that I'm not sure that me coming into my own personhood or even just acknowledging my own individuality is so new that I don't know how to trust somebody loving that because I have spent so little time with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that will always be your work as an attachment type, period.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Anyway, there's a Alexandra Gemini tangent there.
No, I think it's right. I just think that it never goes away.
Yeah, it never does.
I do think it's interesting. My husband's an attachment type also, and one of our kids is a 4, and very quickly sort of disabused us of the notion that she was going to perform in a way that was going to allow us to think we're good parents.
Wow.
Which
a gift and a curse,
which has turned out to be a great gift because I still have more, but I've had to let a lot of it go because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if she hadn't been a 4, that illusion we could have kept going much longer.
So you hexad kids stress out your attachment parent.
Yeah, it's only going to help them.
It's only going to help them.
Only good things can happen.
I do mean that very sincerely. I really. Yeah. Oh, I was thinking about it with my parents, and I'm just more aware that I do think that my dad's a 3. I guess he did some things recently that made me rethink that, but. If we just go with the fact that my mom's a 2 and he's a 3, I just remember more feeling the image orientation more than the hexad versus attachment, and feeling that very acutely as a child, and feeling frustrated and unseen by that. And, with my mom as a 2, it did feel very much about sort of her own image. It felt for both of them about their own image, I guess. Maybe a little bit more with my dad, sort of like a more sort of this is what families look like. Or sort of like this is kind of like the general idealized notion of like what good kids look like. As opposed to my mom, it was much more specific, like, but this is what I want to look like. And I need you to act a certain way so that I can continue to sort of do my 2 thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of reasons that I don't want to have kids. I could write a paper on it, but one of my larger reasons is I'm acutely aware of how important other people's appearance who are with me is, and I don't want to put that on a kid. Like I am
I see what you're saying.
Extremely aware of that. And I just would, in times of stress, it comes out still. And I'm like, I never want to put that on a child. Like, dear God, to me, that's like a cardinal sin of a parent, is to put that expectation on a kid. But, that's just my personal fear as a 3. So parents who are 3s, more power to them, because I could never.
So as all of us being attachment types, what do you feel like you needed from your parents? Like mine's pretty clear. Or mine's a pretty quick and easy answer. Like I needed my parents to redirect my inquiries back to me. And it's kind of a tall task because as a 9, I did not have a lot of direct inquiries. I was just very, very passively following any direction. And I mean, very indirect direction. Like they didn't have to tell me to do something before I knew that's what they wanted me to do. And I was already on my way to do it. It was just the easiest way to just like know that what I was doing was the right thing to do. So it's a tall task in that sense. But I do think that who knows what would have changed. But I do think that what I needed from my parents is direct, like, what do you want to do? What do you think about it? What do you want to do? And like, almost like create an attachment to making them proud of me because I was following my own choices.
That's a good answer. I think my parents actually did that pretty well. With my mom being an 8. There was an attachment to follow your own path, because if you follow anyone else's, that's bullshit. I think something that would have helped me a lot is creating a stronger space to hold emotions in, to like a safe space to experience emotions in. Because I think my family created a lot of judgment around experiencing emotions. And the only emotions that were ever like shown in the house were kind of anger. So it's like, if, that was the only one allowed. So I think, as a person who experienced a lot of depression, I think it would have been very helpful to know that, there was a place where I could process that. So that would have helped.
And those are both good answers. I have a kid, I think, is a 3. And I try really hard to get her to not be focused on like failure. And just doing something because it's fun.
That's so good.
And she doesn't have to be good at it. That's not why you do something necessarily. And I think the emotions thing is really important. And I see in myself also the need for greater self-direction, greater sort of return to, well, what do you think is the right thing to do? I'm really sympathetic as a parent, like how many times you just sort of default to like, you're going to do this because I said so,
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's interesting to sort of like continue to, I don't actually think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that maybe the caveat is, and you can disagree. In fact, I encourage you to disagree, but it still means we still have to do it this way.
Yeah.
That is a very cool thing that I've seen parents do. I'm on parenting TikTok for some reason. I don't know why, but there's a lot of mom shit on my TikTok.
That's interesting.
Probably because,
Nancy.
I know. Well, probably because I find their parenting tactics so interesting. I'm like, oh, that is so cool. Because they like have these conversations with their kids where they actually value their kids' input. And it doesn't mean that they necessarily do what the kid wants to do, but they have like full conversations with their child. And I'm like, I was never treated like that. Like if I had opinions, my opinions were not to be heard. So I think it's so cool that parents are like, oh, you have an opinion, let's talk about your opinion. It might be wrong, but you're allowed to have it. And I'm like, that is so cool, because I didn't understand how to even like know what my opinion was until I was like 21 or 22, and that really set me back. So I think that's really dope.
That is really cool. So something that came up for me, so Courtney, when you were saying the like because I said so thing, it's interesting that I like as a 9, I follow directions. I follow such passive, subtle like almost indiscernible or like imperceptible direction so quickly and easily. However, I have always had a really strong anger response to anyone well, it was just my parents, but to my parents saying because I said so. That's I don't know how to like grapple with that, but it's almost like it's almost hypocritical because when my parent, I guess she's my parent, when my mom would say, because sometimes I would push back a little bit and be like, but why, that annoying thing. And eventually she would get frustrated because I said so. And I would get really angry about that. That's horrible. That's a dumb thing to say. It means you lost the argument and I'm supposed to be able to go do this. You're not being fair. I had a bad response to that. However, if that was never directly stated to me, I would have done whatever she said. I don't know. It's just something to throw out there. Like, I don't know what to do with that information, but it was interesting that came up. Like being directly told something always like brings this like strong, stubborn 9 thing out. But if everything is subtle, I will follow fucking whatever.
I relate to that. Yeah. I relate to that big time. If someone just gives me like directive, yeah, I will. I have a real issue with authority.
Yeah. Me too.
Authoritative authority really pisses me off.
Yeah, me too.
Like instantly. However, if you're just like, oh, well, I would really like it if you did maybe this over here. I'm just like, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if my mom had redirected me and been like, no, we're going to go do this instead, I would have been like, oh yeah, we're going to go do this instead. But instead it was no, because I said so. And I'm like, but that's dumb. What do you mean? Because you said so? This is just like a dead end. And it's just going to end there. Like there's no, I don't know. It was just like too direct. Maybe it was because she's also attachment to, so to feel her get really solid about something was like, whoa, what the fuck? That's against the rules. This is all supposed to be subtle. I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's strange.
Should we move on? Okay. Grounding practices.
Okay.
All right.
Do you want to even like kind of intro that a little bit, Courtney?
I think we've all sort of spoken in various ways of like, how do you find yourself when you're in the swirl of attachment? And how do you sort of even like discern, what is you versus all the sort of incoming? And I think it'll be interesting to hear what Alexandra says. I have a feeling Nancy and I will both say like being alone is very helpful. And then for me, I have some pretty specific questions, and this would be interesting to ask you guys, that are really all about basically support. And, if I'm feeling, if I can feel sort of fear in my body as I'm making a decision or I'm trying to think about what I want, getting clear on, do I feel like, what am I scared of? And if there's a piece of it, just sort of like getting like, am I scared of losing someone's support or losing someone no longer being on my team or whatever that word would be, like recognizing that that's what's informing the equation. And then sort of like, once I recognize that, then being able to say, let's just assume that that's never going to happen. Like, let's assume that person is not going anywhere. Then if I can guarantee that to myself, what would this look like? What would I do then? And so that's been a very helpful thing for me. And similarly, this idea that like, I might have this generalized fear of lack of support or like losing someone, but it's actually not it's very generalized. Like it's actually not anything about that person. And so then I ask myself questions like, well, how would I know that this person's with me? Like what would full support look like for me where I would never have to be worried about it? And that often makes me realize that I have no definition for it because it's like this endless sort of never ending, the ball just keeps like the goalposts just get kicked like 5 yards down every time I think I'm there. And so therefore kind of realizing that the idea that like whatever decision or desire that I'm trying to work through, like it will never solve this issue for me, helps me sort of like, again, separate out if I can sort of get the support issue away from what's the real issue, what do I think? And I know support is a very big, I know you guys would use different language in terms of like, what the fear of loss of attachment, what does that feel like to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then how to work with that.
Yeah, that's definitely how I ground myself as well. It's very similar. I usually think, okay, well, if I fail at this, what's that going to look like? And because I'm self-pres, my main worry is not being comfortable, not being financially comfortable, and not being able to live the life that I want at that time. But I'm lucky enough to have like such a support system that that's not realistic, right? I'm never going to be homeless. I'm, definitely very privileged in that sense. I have a safety net. So it allows me to kind of release that, okay, well, I have to do this for the sake of money, fear, and explore without capitalism.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of overshadowing everything. And then it's just my own disappointment in myself that I fear, which is like, that sucks, but it's a bit more manageable than everything else.
I'm trying to think about even where to begin with this question, because when I am attached to something, it's not about like, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is just like a person or like a thing I want to be around. It's like down to like the cells are oriented around this person. Me being a social type, it's just always going to be a person. My cells are oriented around this person. And so like the story I tell myself is that I will just completely lose who I am, or just like not, sounds dramatic and I don't like mean it to, I guess I do mean it to be, I don't know, whatever. It just like feels like I won't exist anymore without that orientation. And so a lot of the drivers to keep that attachment going is based on this fear of like, if I lose what I'm anchored to, then what am I anchored to? I'm just going to be floating off, and I don't know how to like crystal myself into a solid form without that. Okay. So I don't know if this is directly answering the question or not, but these are just the things that come up. Getting space away from that attachment is very good for me. Very good for me. Just in like a recent example, John was just in Egypt for a little over 3 weeks. And that was the longest that we've been apart since we've been together, which is pretty impressive considering the first year we lived in different states. Nevertheless, I had anxiety approaching that trip because I was like, oh my God, we're going to be apart for this long. Not that I thought it was like, it's not that long. Like it is, but it's not. Anyway, I had a lot of anxiety around that because, okay, I don't know how meta this is, but I was worried that I was going to be just like anxious the whole time that he was gone. I was worried
that you wouldn't be able to exist without him.
Yeah. I was worried that like, because my anchor was not around me, that I was just going to be like frazzled and lost and just like floating around, just like not knowing what to do. And so like a thing that was like very pleasantly surprising about that and very reassuring to me was that being apart and being like sort of like forcing that attachment, that literal cell energetic, like immediate body to body attachment away from me, created this new orientation where I could still feel that we were reaching to each other, not out of like fear or out of nerves or out of this like need to reinforce like my own existence based on this other person. But it was based out of love, and it was based out of attraction, and it's based out of like just wanting to reach out to each other. Again, I'm not sure if this is answering the question directly, but that time apart was really good for me because it did remind me of like, oh, this is what I'm like when I'm alone. This is what I'm like when I'm like, and I don't mean like not in a relationship, but I mean literally when I'm spending time by myself. Oh, I like this. So even just the reminder of, oh, I enjoy myself on my own is very grounding for me to remember, because that takes the threat of like losing the attachment away a little bit, because I won't like lose myself. Is that making sense? I feel like there's maybe a more elegant way I could have put that, but like time alone is not just important for me to just like as a withdrawn type, getting overwhelmed easily or whatever. It's also important to just remember that I enjoy myself on my own, so that if this like horrible thing was to ever happen, I could still exist. Not just like be happy. There's like there's like the emotion. We're not talking about emotions or anything like that, but it's just like I will still exist and know that I exist outside of that.
That makes total sense. That's, I think, I would like to add on to my answer with that, is that there is a fear that I will no longer like be able to sit with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think proving to yourself that you can is a big step, right? Having something in some form, some amount of time where you can kind of timestamp it and be like, see, I did it. There's an ability to kind of calm down about like the what ifs.
Yeah. It's just like for me, it feels like, oh, I enjoy my own company, so I'm good.
Yeah.
I do think that there is something, I think that's true for all the attachment types around sort of, like who will I be with whatever I'm attached to? If not the thing thing or person I'm attached to, like what happens to my identity when this attachment is no longer here?
Right.
And so like, that's the fear we're all sort of talking about. And so having kind of like, as you said, like manageable goals or places where you play around with that. Like one thing I was interested in what you said, Alexandra, and I was sort of thinking about it within myself. Like I also do a lot of body work around like literally feeling support in the body.
That's cool.
Like all the different arches, foot, pelvic, diaphragm, palate, breath as a support structure. This idea that like all the support I need is actually sort of like an internal thing. And I can always source support for myself. And I was curious sort of that, like what you're describing, it feels like a body sense of like, can I feel myself?
Yes, totally. What comes to mind?
I was curious if you had any practices around how do I feel myself?
Well, but I will say that what immediately comes to mind is, I don't even know how many years ago this was now, but this was after a breakup, just really bad relationship. It was attachment, but it was a very bad negative attachment, just constant tension, whatever. Anyway, we break up, he's finally out, all of this stuff. And I remember there was like the original adrenaline of just like the relationship being done and that kind of feeling exciting and, new and all of that. But once I got kind of used to that, I did have like a physical anxiety. And I found that I got really into yoga after that. I got really into yoga and like more than I had ever. I'm just like a very sedentary person. I don't move a lot. I don't want to. And so I remember it being surprising to me that I was suddenly wanting to move and like be on a mat for sometimes hours, almost every day, just like feeling myself. And I think in hindsight, that's what that was. It was just me feeling like ache and me feeling effort and me feeling just like my physical body reminding me that like, oh, I'm here. I exist. Look at what I'm doing. I'm carrying my own body weight. I can feel myself literally getting stronger in existence. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that was really good for me. That is probably something I should regularly practice, not yoga specifically, but some sort of like somatic grounding like that.
Does anything come to mind for you like that, Nancy?
Nothing comes to mind immediately aside from like, so mine is muddled with like mental illness. So it's a little bit hard for me to know what's grounding me in my typing and what's grounding me in my mental stability. I think I find a lot of solace in doing things that I enjoy without telling anyone about them. And it's very hard for me, but I find that when I do that, I get to be the most me. So, like whether it's hiking alone or, going climbing alone or doing that kind of stuff that I find really, truly enjoyable without posting about it, without telling anyone, without calling anyone on the way, and just existing with myself really kind of opens up the air around me to my own existence.
And do you feel like a sense of kind of like intrinsic value or purposefulness?
Yes. Yeah. So it's like a connection to being alive with just the sole purpose of being alive.
No outcome, just isness, just sort of.
Just is. Just being and just ising. Yeah, I think that's a good practice for any 3. I think it's always a great practice for 3s to find something that they somewhat enjoy and not telling anyone about it.
I love that. I think that's really good for an image type.
Me too.
And it proves to you what you actually like too.
Yeah.
Find it.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, I feel like it kind of echoes the, I guess not echoes, but it's a way to like be your own eyes without being distracted by someone else's. Kind of view yourself through your own eyes. Because I feel like, I have 3 fixed, and so it's not as loud as it would be for a 3 core, but I kind of get the sense that 3 has a very easy way of seeing themselves through other people's eyes.
Without knowing it too.
Yeah.
It's so automatic, right? That it's like you can't turn it off. Yeah.
And you don't know when it's happening.
I thought that was a really beautiful place to end. I thought that was nice.
That's good. That was a good suggestion, Courtney.
Okay.
Well, that was great. And Alexandra, you should lead more podcasts.
Lead more podcasts. All right. Well, thank you for encouraging my line to 3.
You're welcome. I'm always here for it.
Okay,
I'm going to go to bed now.
I think it's worth it to do a blind spot call at some point.
Yeah. I do think that would be a good call between us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll all do our homework. We'll do our microphone sound homework so that we don't stress Emeka out, and then we'll do that at some point too.
I really want them to do a social hexad call. Like find some social
that'd be interesting.
Types.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And we could even do like an instinct call with a bunch of other stackings, because Beth, Emeka's Beth, is a sexual 6, and she still has that attachment thing. Like I, as a sexual blind, I guess I was under the impression that like, sexual types know who they're attracted to, but Beth still has a history of pairing herself off with people she was not that attracted to, just based on attachment.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of
sleeping with or having relationships with.
Both. Like as a sexual type, it was sexual attention that she would get from people. But as an attachment type, it was like, if somebody's giving me attention, then they must be correct and I need to oblige.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of episode potentials in our little threesome.
Yeah, I think so too.
Gonna take it over.
Yeah,
it'll be just a Bermuda podcast.
All right. Well, that was nice, guys.
Okay. Yeah, it was. It's nice talking.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Svipti mig ekki að nóttu til bakar að þau verify.